So for this video, I'm going to go over the notes for our ecology section 1, which is going to focus on food webs, food chains, energy transfer, trophic levels, and different types of consumers that we see in ecosystems. I'm going to start with some vocabulary here. You should know the difference between biotic and abiotic. Abiotic factors are factors that are non-living, while biotic factors are factors that are living. The prefix of bio means living. So when we think of biotic factors, we want to think of things such as the animals and plants in the environment. When we think about abiotic factors, we want to think about the non-living factors, such as the air, the rocks, the water. Those things are all non-living. Within an ecosystem, we organize things according to levels. So the levels of organization when we look at an ecosystem include individual species, a population, a community, an ecosystem, a biome, and the biosphere. I would definitely study each of these vocabulary words. A species is just a single organism or an individual that can breed and produce fertile offspring. A population of an area is going to be all of the same species. So within our classroom, we would call all of the humans, all of the Homo sapiens, a population of humans in our classroom. The community is going to include different species. So within our classroom, there is also bacteria living. And so we have different species, so we would now call it a community. Within the ecosystem of our classroom, we would then include abiotic factors. So not only do we have populations of humans and bacteria in our classroom, but we also have a non-living factors such as air and the desks around us, which are non-living. Then we have what are called biomes. Biomes are classified according to similar precipitation levels and temperatures. And then we have the overall biosphere, which includes the entire Earth where there are living things from the bottom of the ocean all the way up high into our atmosphere. So this visual can help you with understanding those levels of organization. I have an individual elk here, and then I have a population of those elk, which means that they can breed and create fertile offspring. Within the entire community for this ecosystem, I have multiple different species. I have a beaver as well as an owl and the elk, and then also don't forget about the living plants, such as the trees and the grass. Within that ecosystem, when I call it an ecosystem, I have to include the abiotic factors. So that is going to include things such as the air and the water, as well as all of the populations that make up the community. Within a biome, the biomes are going to have similar temperatures and precipitation, and then we put it all together to have our biosphere. So you want to be able to name the levels of organization in this ecosystem. For example, I have an individual gazelle, and then I have a population here of 3 gazelles. Within this community, I have several different species. I have a population of grass, a population of trees and bushes, and a population of the gazelle. Within this ecosystem, it has non-living factors also, which would include the air, water, and rocks of the area. And then this particular biome is a savanna biome, which is going to be in Kenya, Africa. So if you're given an image like this, you should be able to name things that make up an ecosystem, things that make up a community, as well as naming one population. So when you name things that make up an ecosystem, make sure that you include both biotic and abiotic factors. When you include things that make up a community, you need to include multiple different populations of different species. And when you name just a population, make sure that you are only naming one species. Now, when we look at an ecosystem, we need to start with what is considered the base of the food chain or the base of the food web. That is going to be the producers. Producers are organisms that capture energy or sunlight they capture the energy from either sunlight or chemicals, and they use it to make their own food. So these organisms do not have a mouth where they consume things. They are going to produce and make their own molecules for food. Usually it's a sugar molecule that they make. So organisms that are producers include organisms such as plants, trees, grass, as well as organisms that are in the ocean like algae or seagrass. Those also are photosynthetic, making their own food from the sun. There's also organisms that produce their own food from chemicals, and those do a process called chemosynthesis. So very similar to photosynthesis. If you remember, photosynthesis is going to use sun, chemosynthesis is going to use chemicals. Either way, they're going to be making their own food from the energy of those molecules. Sometimes producers are called autotrophs or primary producers. So the word autotroph and producer are interchangeable. The word primary producer is the same as a producer or an autotroph. They are simply organisms that take energy and they make that their own food from that energy, either through photosynthesis or chemosynthesis. Another way that we classify organisms is according to what they consume. Herbivores are going to eat the producers, so they're going to eat plant material. Carnivores are going to eat other animals that are non-plant organisms. Omnivores will eat both plants and animals. Scavengers are going to feed on animals that are killed by the other carnivores. Examples of those include vultures and hyenas. A decomposer is going to decompose the organic material in the soil. Organisms that do that include earthworms, as well as fungus, like the mushroom seen in this image here. So you want to make yourself familiar with some of the different things that organisms eat. For example, this lion here is a carnivore. It's actually sitting and protecting its food so that it has it there to eat. Now, if the lion leaves, then you might have some scavengers come by, such as some vultures or hyenas that are going to feed on the carcass that the lion killed. The zebras here are herbivores. They are going to be plant eaters. They eat the grasses throughout the savanna. The same with this gazelle. He is going to be eating things such as the plants and the tree matter in the savanna. So when we organize an ecosystem, we organize it according to the producers being on the bottom and then the consumer levels after that. So anything that eats the producers, all of the herbivores, are going to be considered primary consumers. So first level consumers, primary consumers, are going to be organisms that feed on the lowest level of the food web. They are also called primary consumers or heterotrophs or herbivores. Those are all interchangeable words. At the next level up, we get our secondary consumers. Those are going to feed on the primary producer or primary consumers. Often they're always going to be carnivores. They're also known as heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are simply organisms that eat other organisms. Producers, autotrophs, are always going to produce their own food. So carnivores that are at the secondary consumer level, those are going to feed on the primary consumers. And then finally, you get your tertiary consumers. So we can see here our hawk is considered a tertiary consumer. That's going to be your top carnivore. So there's some vocabulary to memorize here. Your producers, which are going to be organisms that make their own food, are going to make up the bottom level. The herbivores are going to be called primary consumers. They're going to make up the next level. The carnivores are considered secondary consumers. And then finally, we have our top carnivore or our tertiary consumer. Once we know what eats what, we can create food chains and food webs. A food chain is simply a series of steps that shows us the energy transfer from one organism to the next because of them consuming one another. Each step within a food chain is called a trophic level. We always start with producers. The producers are going to make their own food and provide the base of the food chain. They always get their energy either from the sun or from chemicals. So we can see in our food chain here that we start with a flower that's getting its energy from the sun. The flower is considered the producer making its own food. The flower is then eaten by the caterpillar. The caterpillar would be considered a primary consumer and a herbivore. The frog then eats the caterpillar. Because the caterpillar is a consumer itself, the frog is considered a secondary consumer. It is going to be a carnivore. That frog then gets eaten by the snake. The snake is eating another consumer, which makes that snake a consumer itself and also a carnivore. We're now at the top level. Our owl is considered an apex predator or our tertiary consumer. So our flower would be the first trophic level. Our caterpillar would be the second trophic level. Our frog would be the third trophic level. Our snake would be the fourth trophic level, and our owl puts us all the way up at our fifth trophic level. In the previous slide, we had a food chain with arrows pointing just from one organism to the next organism to show who consumes who and the flow of energy. When we take a bunch of food chains and we put them together, we then can create an entire food web. A food web shows the flow of energy between many different organisms within the ecosystem. We always have to make sure that the arrows flow in the correct direction. We always want to show who the energy flows into, okay? So for example, in this image here, you can see that the tree gets consumed by the giraffe. You want to make sure that the arrow points from the tree to the giraffe to show that the energy is going from the tree to the giraffe. If you put the arrow in the wrong way, you would be saying that the tree is consuming the giraffe. And we know that's not possible. The tree doesn't even have a mouth to be able to do that. So we do want to make sure that the arrows show the correct flow of energy and always go towards the consumer. As energy flows within an ecosystem and gets passed from one organism to the next, the amount of energy available at each trophic level can be shown in an energy pyramid. As energy flows from the producers to the herbivores, not all of the energy gets transferred from one level to the next. 90% of the energy is actually either used by the organism or lost as heat. Only approximately 10% of the energy at one level gets passed up to the next level. That's why we always have to have more producers than we do herbivores. If you think about this for a minute, we have to have a lot more grass available for the rabbits to eat. If we had more rabbits than we did grass, there wouldn't be enough food available for all of those rabbits. And the majority of the reason for that is because of the lack of energy transfer and only 10% of the energy passing from one level to the next. So energy pyramids show us how much energy is available at each of the different trophic levels. Trophic level 1 is always going to include the producers that make their own food, and that's where the most amount of energy is available. As you go up, there's less and less energy available, and so there's also a less number of organisms because only 10% of that energy is being passed up. Most food chains are going to be limited to 4 or 5 trophic levels, and that's because of the transfer of energy being so inefficient. Only about 10% of that energy is being passed from one energy level to from one trophic level to the next. This is known as the 10% energy transfer rule. So that means that the amount of organisms, the amount of biomass, which is simply how much mass an individual species makes up in a particular ecosystem at a time, we can't have more rabbits than we have producers to feed those rabbits because some of that energy is not going to be transferred from one level to the next. So when an energy pyramid is drawn to scale, to include the energy transfer and the biomass, they look like this image here. You can see we have to have a lot of producers to support the next level up of the primary consumer. So why is there so much energy lost from one trophic level to the next? Well, the biggest loss of energy is because of a process called cellular respiration. That's the process that every living thing does to carry out life processes, like moving, transporting molecules, growing, and reproduction. When you do the process of cellular respiration, it releases heat energy. That energy gets lost to the environment. In addition, not everything gets eaten and passed up to the next level. For example, things like plant roots and bones are not often consumed, and so the energy from those parts gets lost and is not passed to that next level. Finally, there's also some food that does get eaten that's actually not digestible. Some of the biomass gets just passed through the organism and it's lost in the feces. Feces is poo. And urine, which is another form of waste. Some animals and plants will also simply die without ever being consumed. And so that energy is also not passed to the next level. So what happens when those dead organisms just die? Do they just sit on the surface? It's a good thing they don't. We actually would have an entire planet covered by corpses and feces. But instead, we have a part of our food chains and webs called decomposers. Decomposers are going to break down the waste and the living matter. They're going to gain energy for themselves and actually release those nutrients back into the environment. We're going to learn more about that with the biogeochemical cycles, where these nutrients all get recycled. They then can be absorbed by the roots of plants or bacteria in the soil and the oceans, and then they can make new molecules for new organisms. It's usually bacteria and fungi that are the key decomposers in most ecosystems. They're going to use enzymes to break down dead matter and absorb the materials. And then there are some larger decomposers like earthworms and slugs that consume different fragments of dead matter, and then they make it easier for the bacteria and fungus to decompose the material as well. Decomposers that take that dead matter and are larger decomposers like that earthworm and slug, we often refer to them as detritivores. Another pyramid that we use to represent trophic levels is a biomass pyramid. Biomass pyramids are going to show you how much living matter is at each trophic level. Typically, the greatest biomass is in the plants. That is usually going to be in a terrestrial or land ecosystem. But in the ocean, this is not as true because many of the producers in the ocean are tiny microscopic organisms. So their mass doesn't add up to as much as the carnivores. Now keep in mind, this does not show the energy transfer. This just shows the mass of all the organisms at each of the different levels. Similar to a biomass pyramid is a pyramid of numbers. A pyramid of numbers actually shows you the actual number of individual organisms at each of the different trophic levels. For example, if you're in a forest, one oak tree might support hundreds of caterpillars in that tree. And then there might be 4 or 5 birds that live in that tree and eat those caterpillars. And then there might just be 1 sparrowhawk that gets supported by the birds and caterpillars living in that tree. If you look at the left image, we can see how it's a little bit different in another ecosystem. The number of plants or green leaves is a very large number to support things like the snails and the earthworms. And then there's a smaller number of birds, and then an even smaller number of sparrowhawks. So the thing to keep in mind is that this is a pyramid that shows you the actual number of individual organisms at each level.